Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to take you through the process of drawing the wooden mannequin figure that you see posed there to the right. If you look really closely, you'll see I started with what we call gestural lines, which means that I'm just trying to get the pose of the figure down with a few quick lines and just get the idea of the positioning without trying to get very specific. And then as I go through the drawing, I start to put some ovals in, some either long thin ovals for the arms and leg sections, or some wider ovals, and I try to get the shapes of the different sections nailed down with just some ovals that are kind of holding the place of the overall parts of the figure. And as I get a little more specific, you'll see I bounce around different parts of the drawing. I'm trying to keep an eye on the overall drawing as a whole, and the measurements and the proportions of everything, as well as trying to get a little more specific in each section. You can see the drawing is not perfect. We're working from a reference, we're not tracing or anything, so I don't expect your drawing to be on the money perfect with the proportions and the shapes, but we're doing our best to try to get the pose correct, and then later in the drawing you'll see me get into the shading. One of the things I do is I like to keep my drawing and my reference in a good line of sight where I can quickly look back and forth between the drawing and the reference and the drawing and the reference. In this case, it was up on my laptop screen, so I was putting the laptop screen directly in front of me and the drawing in front of me as well, so I could just be looking up and down, and it makes it a lot easier to notice any mistakes or adjustments you have to make. An important note about the mannequin figure is when you look at the proportions, you'll notice that the arm is divided into two sections. Right? You've got the upper section of the arm and the lower section of the arm. One is from the elbow to the shoulder, and the other is from the elbow to the wrist, and they're about the same length. The same goes for the legs. If you look at the space between the hip joint and the knee joint, and then the knees to the ankle, they're about the same. So you should be double checking in your drawing that you're seeing that a similar proportion. And as you're going through your drawing, there should be a constant evaluation. You should be always double checking to see if what you're drawing is what you want to draw, right? There's nothing wrong with erasing a whole section if you have to and starting over, as long as the final product is the way you want it to look. So that's why I draw very lightly in the beginning. It may have been kind of hard for you to see my drawing in the beginning, even in the video, because I was drawing very lightly. That way I'm not really committing to anything. I don't worry too much if I have to erase. And then as I get into the drawing a little more, I get a little more committed to the shapes I'm drawing, and I press a little bit harder. And as you see me draw the foot here, it's a good time to talk about the idea of foreshortening. You can see how the toes are pointing a little bit at me, which makes them a little bit trickier to draw. So really focus on what you're seeing there instead of what you think you see, right? Focus on the shapes that make up that foot, and you'll be able to get the idea of foreshortening a little more believably in your drawing. But those will be the areas that are the trickiest to get realistic, will be any areas that are foreshortened, which means an arm pointing at you, a foot pointing at you. Those will be the trickiest, so really focus on what you're seeing there and stay on the lookout for foreshortened parts of the drawing. And with the basic parts of the drawing just about finished up, I'm going to start to focus a little more on the shading. As you see from the reference here, these are the really important elements of any shaded drawing that you're looking to include. You don't have to draw in your light source specifically like you see here, but by showing accurate highlights, midtones, a core shadow, a reflected highlight if there is one, and a cast shadow, then that light source will become really easy to see. So feel free to pause this if you need to. With this part of the drawing, what I usually like to do as I start shading is I actually will squint my eyes when I'm looking at the reference and try to simplify my reference into just a few simple values. If you can identify light, medium, and dark at this stage in the drawing, you're setting yourself up very well. That way, as you go back into each section one by one, you can start to look a little bit more specifically at the changes in value that you see, and the whole drawing will come together a little more realistically. Because this wooden mannequin figure is made up almost entirely of rounded shapes, there's a lot of gradual changes in value as you look from one section to the next. I'm trying to steer clear of any blending or smudging here because it's kind of a small drawing that needs some more specific treatment. If I smudge a little too much, it's going to take my values and really muddy them up and make them all look a little too similar. So I'm trying to just use the pressure of my pencil to control the gradual blending of the values. But, feel free to use your eraser at any point, like you saw I did just there, if any area gets a little darker than you want it to be. Remember, one of the things you're looking for is a good sense of contrast. which means if you notice an area in the reference is very light compared to what's next to it, then you should be trying to achieve that same quality in your drawing. A good thing to remember as you go through any pencil shaded drawing is that you're looking for edges, not outlines, right? Edges, not outlines. You should be able to see the edges of all the parts of your drawing, but you shouldn't really be relying on outlines in a realistic pencil drawing. And remember to really study what you're looking at, right? There's a big shadow on the chest of this figure, and even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if you haven't quickly figured out that the sphere, the ball he's holding, is casting the shadow on his chest, even if you don't see that right away, you still see that it's a dark shadow on the chest. So make sure that you're drawing what you see instead of what you think you see, right? We're relying on our eyes here. Also, you should try to get as detailed as you possibly can, even with the joints and the areas that are in between the sections of the arms and the legs. Those little ball joints that are connecting them. Try to get really specific with the details you see there. Depending on which way it's turned, you might see a slot, or you might see a little bit of a circle that represents where the screw is holding it together. And now I'm going to take a little bit of break from talking while you watch me do a little more work on the drawing here. As you get to the end of a drawing like this, you should really be looking for a full range of values. Right? You're going to see as I work on the base here that I'm really trying to add in the darkest value in the whole drawing, which is the black part of the platform. But make sure you're going back to each section and asking yourself if the area you drew is as dark or as light as it needs to be, and try to create the realistic amount of values that you see. And at the end of the drawing, after I finish the base here, I'm going to work on the cast shadow that the figure's creating on the table, and then a little bit on the wall there, but I'm just going to do the part that's on the table and then let it fade away. And I'll erase any last smudges, try to clean it up as much as possible, and then that's it. Thanks for watching.